Hello, YouTube audience. Welcome back to Movies I Watched in 2025. Every time I make one of these videos, I hate doing it more and more. But this time we're talking about June, which is the most boring month of all time. But the movies aren't boring, I promise. Let's talk about the movies. It's time to talk about more James Bond. Last time I talked about Bond, it was the start of the Roger Moore era, with To Live and Let Die. And now it's time to talk about The Man with the Golden Gun. And right off the bat, I just want to mention that the main song for this movie is shit. Every James Bond movie has a main song and starts with a really awesome opening credit sequence. Sometimes the songs are pretty awesome, like You Only Live Twice and Diamonds Are Forever. But The Man with the Golden Gun is a good example of when the main song is awful. It sounds like they made the soundtrack first and then had some girl come in and sing over it. And then the man with the golden gun.
Love is required whenever he's hired. It comes just before the kill.
Absolutely terrible. Now, when it comes to the movie, it's alright. This was a very enjoyable action-adventure movie, and that's exactly what it is. It's an action-adventure movie. It's fine, but every once in a while, I think back to From Russia with Love, and I just think about how awesome that movie is. Because that movie feels more like a spy thriller than anything else. A spy thriller that's a little bit self-aware, but also takes itself seriously enough for you to actually care about what's going on. And when it comes to these 70s James Bond movies, it almost feels like It feels like they're a little bit too self-aware. Like, so far, these Roger Moore movies, they're fine. But it feels like the franchise knows exactly what it is, and now it's just a giant excuse to show James Bond going to different parts of the world. Because so far, every James Bond movie is pretty much the same. James Bond, he travels the world, he beats a bad guy, and he fucks bitches. That's literally what this franchise is. Now this movie, The Man with the Golden Gun, is a little bit different. The initial premise is actually pretty interesting, and it's actually much different than other James Bond movies. You know, instead of James Bond going after the bad guy is going after James Bond. It starts with James Bond going into headquarters, and his boss M tells him that a talented hitman is after him, the man with the golden gun. His name, though, is Scaramanga. Scaramanga? And gaming!
Garugamash!
Oh yeah!
Scaramanga has a midget sidekick and also has a third nipple. And that third nipple thing actually does come into play into the story. And maybe I shouldn't call the midget a midget and maybe just call him a little person. But you know, this movie doesn't give a fuck.
I've never killed a midget before, but there can always be a first time.
I'm just gonna call him the same thing the movie calls him.
Something's gone wrong.
There's a midget with a gun on him.
A midget?
So yeah, the initial premise is pretty cool. James Bond is being hunted down by a vicious hitman. But then eventually the movie just kind of abandons that initial premise and goes back to being a typical James Bond adventure. It's a little disappointing, but I do think the movie makes up for it by having a pretty great third act. James Bond goes to Scaramanga's island, and there's actually a pretty interesting discussion about, you know, the art of killing.
You get as much fulfillment out of killing as I do, so why didn't you admit it?
I admit killing you would be a pleasure.
Another interesting thing about this movie is how horny it is.
How's the water?
Why don't you come in and find out?
Sounds very tempting, Miss,
To me.
Really?
This might be the horniest James Bond movie yet.
Bottoms up?
And speaking of sex, this movie might have my favorite Bond girl, Agent Goodnight. For one, it's really cool to see a Bond girl be a part of the same Secret Service that James Bond is in, but also it's really fun to see their relationship, especially since they already know each other.
James, it's wonderful to see you.
But Goodnight, you know, she is fucking gorgeous. And I just really liked her character. I thought the performance that actress gave was really great. There's also a returning character in this movie, being the sheriff from the last movie. And James Bond is just as excited to see him as I was.
Now I know you!
Oh no.
So I mean, yeah, overall, this was a James Bond movie. Specifically, a 70s James Bond movie. It was fun, it was definitely an adventure. I wouldn't say it was better than any of the original James Bond movies. The soundtrack was okay for the most part, other than that main theme. The acting overall is actually pretty great. Christopher Lee as the man with the golden gun is a really great antagonist. Roger Moore seems to get more comfortable playing Bond. And the more I watch these movies, the more I appreciate the supporting characters. I really like M, I like Q, and I like Moneypenny. I think they're all great. When it comes to the directing of this movie, it's alright. The only real interesting bits in this movie directing-wise is the scene that takes place in the Man with the Golden Gun's kill room. Those scenes are really awesome, and part of me wishes that the whole movie looked like that. James Bond, the Man with the Golden Gun. I'm gonna give it a 7 out of 10. It's just as good as the last one. It's a fun, entertaining movie, but I am kind of hoping that the movies will get a little bit more serious after this. I want to see some real spy espionage in my spy movie, goddammit.
Bond, are you there? Good night.
She's just coming, sir.
Good night. Good night.
Now it's time to talk about some more Dario Argento. I've talked about a few of his movies in the past in this series. I've talked about Four Flies on Grey Velvet, Inferno, Tenebrae, and now it's time to talk about Opera. This movie is about a girl named Betty, who gets the chance to play Lady Macbeth in an opera directed by an eccentric director.
I've never seen such lousy direction.
We have a problem?
Yes, you! This isn't one of your crummy movies. Birds on stage, back projection, laser beams. What is this, an opera or amusement park?
But then, out of nowhere, a mysterious killer comes in, ties Betty up, and kills people in front of her throughout the movie, forcing her to watch with spikes on the eyes. The classic spikes on the eyes trick. It happens to the best of us. And as the movie goes on, Betty tries to find out who the murderer is, while also learning about the importance of individuality. And this movie is really good. This movie, it's actually surprisingly unsettling for a slasher giallo film. You know, as someone who has seen a lot of movies where people die from a mysterious killer, I always say to myself, man, there's never going to be another slasher film that gets under my skin with the kills. I'm never going to see a slasher kill actually shock me with how gruesome or fucked up it is. But this movie made me bite my tongue. The kills in this movie are actually pretty fucked up, and I think it's a testament of how great Argento is at crafting great characters. And you know, you kind of have to be good at making good characters if you're making whodunit films. He's able to make a lot of characters very likable and relatable, especially when it comes to the women in his movies. He treats the women with a lot of respect and sincerity, especially when it comes to the main character in this movie, Betty. So when the kill scenes happen and he frames them in this very over-the-top, mean-spirited way, playing Italian metal music in the background of each one of them, there's like a really weird juxtaposition going on there. It's almost like this whole movie is directed like a respectful Argento film. But when the kill scenes happen, they're directed with this tone that's very similar to a basic 80s slasher. Almost making a point that slasher films aren't very good because they're not trying to be movies, they're trying to be slasher movies. And I think that's what makes this movie really interesting. This movie feels like Argento somewhat criticizing the slasher films at the time, comparing them to a play that gets remade for the stage over and over again.
But this time our director OD'd on weird. It isn't like the movies. There, when you come up with something original, everyone congratulates you.
And I think that criticism really fits in with what Betty is dealing with in the movie. She's dealing with the struggle of living under other people's opinions.
Whenever a woman has a problem, men always presume it's love.
Well, you know, you Sopranos are famous for,
Whoring around?
The first scene with her shows her getting the news about the Lady Macbeth role, and not really being interested to do it, because she's heard that the Macbeth play causes bad luck. Oh boy, was she right. But everyone around her is telling her to do it because it would be great for her career. Telling her it'd be good for her. You gotta do it. This is gonna propel you into stardom. And then later you find out that her mother was also a singer, kind of insinuating that Betty is only a singer because her mother was. Betty is a woman who follows what other people tell her, and as the movie goes on, she becomes more of her own person, sticking up for herself. There's a point in the film where she runs into her stalker little girl neighbor.
What?
It's this little girl that goes into the air vents and stalks Betty in her room. It's really fucking weird. But anyway, she comes across this little girl and her mother is a complete fucking asshole. And it makes you and also Betty think, You know, I hope that little girl doesn't grow up to be like her mother.
So filthy! Disgusting! You're disgusting! You're always naked! That's enough! Go to your room!
Which obviously ties into what Betty's going through. This whole movie, it's a giallo film about the importance of uniqueness and individuality.
I wanted to escape altogether, because I'm different. I don't even vaguely resemble others, any of them.
Telling the audience to embrace themselves, while also telling 80s slasher films to craft their own unique identities. It's genius! This movie is fucking genius. Until it's not. This movie is not perfect. I think conceptually it's great, but I also think the movie is pretty disjointed, especially when it comes to the ending, which is super batshit insane. Almost in a good way, I guess. I don't know, it's really messy. This movie is messy, not Ronaldo. There's also a few weird Italianisms in this movie. Things you see in other giallo films, but in this movie, it's a little bit over the top. For example, the dubbing. You know, a lot of these giallo films, they have English dub over it. And in this movie, it comes off a little bit weird sometimes.
I've got a magnifying glass somewhere. I'm sure I have. Oh, it should be in... Oh, damn.
But overall, I really liked this movie. I thought it looked great. You know, Argento, he's a great director. There's a lot of really weird dream sequences in this movie that are kind of cool. I feel like I've said that before. And overall, yeah, I would give this movie a 4 or a 4.5 out of 5.
I think it's unwise to use movies as a guide for reality, don't you, Inspector?
No.
The next movie that I watched in June is Bullitt. This movie stars Steve McQueen as Detective Frank Bullitt. His name is Bullitt, and it has 2 T's. But pretty much in the movie, Bullitt has to protect a witness that's important in an organized crime case. He has to testify on court or something. But the witness gets killed.
Told me.
And Bullitt is left to pick up all the pieces, trying to find out who the fuck killed him. And what the fuck is going on? It's a classic police story. I love cops.
You need a lead!
Call me a bootlicker all you want, but I love movies about cops. It's a good way to look at the law and see the relationship it has with morality. Because the whole point of being a cop is trying to protect the public. But the police don't work for the public, they work for the government. They're not a part of the public. I mean, they are, but like they work under people who don't. And this movie is kind of about that. It's about Bullitt trying to figure out this case, all while, you know, these politicians are trying to say, hey, you know, I need this witness.
Come on now, don't be naive, Lieutenant. We both know how careers are made. Integrity is something you sell to the public.
You sell whatever you want, but don't sell it here tonight.
And the one politician character in this movie is a complete asshole.
Thank you, Doctor. I'd like to have Dr. Willard replaced. I think he's too young and inexperienced. I'd prefer my surgeon. Will you inform the administrator, please?
But Dr. Willard is one of our
I'd like him replaced, if you don't mind.
Well, I'll report this to our administrator.
Thank you very much.
And this movie is actually pretty infamous for having a pretty awesome car chase scene. And yeah, that scene is really awesome. And I can definitely see how influential it is. This movie came out in 1968. I haven't watched a lot of 60s movies, but I have seen James Bond. And the car chases in the 60s Bond movies, especially the early ones, are not the best. They're still suspenseful, but, you know, Bullitt out here is driving with fucking bullets coming at him. His name is Bullitt. But seriously, this movie is actually really great. Directing-wise, this movie looks incredible. Not only does it capture the era of the 60s pretty well, which, you know, makes sense because it is a 60s movie, but this movie, it, like, allows you to get into, you know, this world. You get into Bullitt's world. Because this movie is not only a crime police mystery movie, but it's also a character study of Bullitt. The movie allows you to get into his head, to study him, to understand him as a character. And by the end, you see the world through exactly his eyes. And it's a really great immersive experience, I would say. This movie is like the equivalent of a VR game where you get to play as a police officer. This movie is really precise on the details of what happens when you're a police officer. While also having a lot of awesome action. Back to the directing, It's great. The whole movie looks really good, and I really like the way the camera moves around, how each scene is set up. It's very precise and it allows you to get really into what's going on. The soundtrack of this movie is also really great. It's like kind of pulpy but jazzy. And of course, Steve McQueen as Bullitt is a really fantastic performance. I really think Steve McQueen's performance kind of like elevates the movie a little bit. His character is really entertaining to watch, not because he's like crazy or anything, but it's because you understand him. He's very matter of fact. This whole movie is actually very matter of fact. It just shows you the details. And I really like the separation that Bullitt has in his personal life and his work life. He tries to keep it separate as much as possible, and as soon as it does crash together a little bit, it's like a big realization moment for Bullitt and also the audience. It's like, oh shit, you know, these are people dying. This is kind of fucked up. But you can't think about that because the mystery, the crime, the goal is way more important. You know, you look at a fucking dead woman on the ground and you don't flinch. You say, okay, a woman died. Who did this? What are the clues? That's how it is, man. You know, being a police officer. I should know. I played GTA RP. And yeah, there's a lot of really awesome sequences in this movie. Everything going on in the hospital is pretty awesome. Of course, the car chase scene is really great. I like how it starts with the enemies following Bullitt, and then when Bullitt realizes he's being followed, he like gets behind him somehow and starts following them. But I think the best sequence in the movie is actually the airport sequence. That sequence is really great, and I think it goes in line with the whole, you know, police officers are desensitized to the fucked up shit versus what the public views everything as. And overall, I think this movie was really awesome. Not only is it a really great detective story, but it's also a really good character study about how what your life is surrounded by can desensitize you to certain things, which can affect your relationship with the outside world.
Do you let anything reach you? I mean, really reach you? Or are you so used to it by now that nothing really touches you?
And I'm going to give Bullitt a 9 out of 10. I can definitely see myself rewatching this. It's a very good detective movie. The next movie that I watched in June is The Driver. And if Bullitt was about how your life can desensitize you to the point where you become like a husk of yourself, The Driver is all about what you can do to try to avoid that by looking at everything like a giant game.
You know what the best part of our job is? It's just a game. It's either them or us.
This whole movie feels like a game, to the point where none of the characters even have names. Their names are just what they are. This movie, it almost feels like It feels like a storyline that I would make up when I was young while playing with Legos. And then the driver, he drives, and the cops are after him, and then he gets the money, and then the detective, he's like, oh no, no, no. This movie is like stupidly simple. It is so stripped back and bare bones. It is exactly what it is. The movie follows the driver. He's a getaway driver for heists. He doesn't talk much, and he stares a lot. Sounds familiar. But basically in the movie, there's this detective played by Bruce Dern who's trying to catch the driver. He wants to have a big catch, and the driver is it.
You know what I'm gonna do? I'm gonna catch the cowboy that's never been caught. Cowboy Desperado.
And as the movie goes on, you see the little chess pieces going across the board. You see, the detective makes his moves, and the driver makes his moves, and then, it's a movie. And like I kind of alluded to, there are some pretty obvious comparisons to Nicholas Winding Refn's Drive. This movie, it feels like 70s Drive. Everything from the directing, to the style, to the performances, it all... It all makes this movie feel like some sort of prediction from 70s filmmakers. Specifically Walter Hill, the director of this film, who I talked about last video with Southern Comfort. He's made some good movies, Southern Comfort, The Warriors. I would say that this movie is just as good as Southern Comfort, not as good as The Warriors, definitely not as good as Drive. I will say, though, that this is probably Walter Hill's best looking movie. This movie looks pretty terrific the entire time. A lot of it feels a little bit ahead of its time. Feels like some shit that would be in Miami Vice that would come out like you know, years after this. And there's just a lot of really nice looking visuals in this movie. Isabelle Adjani is in it. I think really the only thing that kind of holds this movie back is just how stupidly simple it is. It's literally just a cat and mouse story between these two different characters. The driver, you know, he looks at his work and his, you know, getaway driving. He looks at it as nothing more than a job, while the detective character looks at it as a big game. He looks at it as the most interesting game ever because there's actual stakes or some shit.
You know what you do first thing every morning? Read the sports page. You know why? Best part of the newspaper. Winners, losers, how it happened, score. Now, we got a much better game than one they give the players. They don't retire us after 10 years.
I guess you figure you're a winner.
That's it. And you're a loser.
But as the story goes on, the driver kind of picks up on what type of game the detective is playing, which leads to the driver trying to play along.
You don't care about the money.
Might even send it to him.
Sucker's game.
Showing his change throughout the movie. You know, the movie starts with him being a little bit over dramatic, a little bit depressed. But then as he starts playing this game with this detective, he starts to kind of enjoy it. And in a way, the whole movie is about how a character finds enjoyment out of his job and out of his life. Which, of course, you know, your job and your life are pretty much the same thing. You know, there's some really great wise words from the Wizard that I think fits perfectly right now.
Oh, look at it this way, you know, man takes a job, you know? And that job, I mean, like that, you know, that becomes what he is. You get a job, you become the job. I don't know, that's about the dumbest thing I ever heard.
But overall, though, I kind of liked this movie. And I think this is a movie that I would love a lot more while rewatching it, knowing how simple it is. Because this movie is a pleasure to look at. You know, like I said, this movie looks incredible. And there's a lot of really fantastic car chase sequences in this movie. Some car chase sequences that get you on the edge of your seat. And I really like the way that Walter Hill kind of films a lot of them. Near the end, Walter Hill films a car chase kind of like as if it was like a on-foot chase. Like they're hiding from each other in a warehouse and everything. It's pretty interesting. And even though the characters are very, very simple, I still kind of like them. You know, actually, because they're so simple, you can kind of attribute anything you want to them. But I think my favorite part about this movie is probably the ending. I kind of love the ending. But overall, you know, I like this movie. I thought it was really good. And I'd give this movie like a 7 or an 8 out of 10. Either one is fine. I'm just going to give it an 8 because I'm a nice guy. I'm a very nice guy. I'm one of the most generous guys to exist. But of course, girls don't like nice guys. They like tough, you know, evil guys.
A friend of yours told me where I could find you in the middle of the day.
I don't have any friends.
That's right. No friends. No steady job. No girlfriend.
The next movie that I watched in June is Predator 2. A sequel to the 80s sci-fi classic Predator. And Predator is a pretty good movie. I've only seen it once, but I really enjoyed it. Arnold Schwarzenegger is in it. He's like, get to the chopper. Was that good? Was that a good impression? But that movie is a really awesome sci-fi alien movie. And it definitely didn't need a sequel. But you know, when Hollywood gets a great idea that's really simple, that's easy to replicate over and over again, they're definitely gonna do that shit. So in 1990, they released Predator 2. And it's actually not bad. This movie takes place in the far future of 1997 in Los Angeles. Because of course, if any Predator is going to go anywhere, it's going to go to Los Angeles. There's so many Predators there already. But you know, in the first Predator movie, the Predator finds this group of soldiers because it's looking for, you know, a competition, you know, it's looking for a hunt or something. But in Predator 2, the Predator goes to Los Angeles because there's tons of gang wars going on.
Drought-ridden Los Angeles swelters in agonizing heat. Drug lords wage bloody warfare in the streets. Yet another open conflict. Oh, fuck this! Get me out of here!
The main character of the movie is Danny Glover, which is kind of awesome. Yes, Mr. I'm too old for this shit is going up against a predator.
Raj, meet your new partner.
I'm too old for this shit.
Basically, Danny Glover is a police officer who's in charge of a strike team. The movie starts with a gang fighting against the police, and then Danny Glover comes in and fucking does some cool shit or something. But before him and his strike team can enter the building, a predator comes in and kills the gang for him. Of course, Danny Glover is like, this is weird. But then the feds come in, and they're like, okay, we're taking over this operation. You gotta cooperate with us.
You will extend him your full cooperation.
Which means you're cutting off my dick and shoving it up my ass.
The leader of the feds being Gary Busey. His name is Keys.
Who the hell are you, Keys? Who you really chasing, Keys? Keys.
And basically, as the movie goes on, Danny Glover tries to get into the feds' business, trying to figure out what the fuck is going on, what the fuck is a predator, all while the predator goes around Los Angeles killing people. So pretty much this movie is what if Predator was in the city. And there is a lot of reasons to not like this movie. The writing and the line delivery in this movie is really fucking questionable.
And be careful, these guys are good.
Hey, don't worry, Lieutenant. Surveillance is my specialty.
Okay, then.
It almost makes this movie feel like a live-action cartoon at times. There's also a lot of really weird gang shit going on in this movie, involving like Jamaicans and shit like that. I don't fucking know. And of course, this is a sequel to a movie that didn't need a sequel. This movie should be shit. This movie should be the worst thing to ever exist. And if you look online, the reviews for this movie are pretty negative, actually. But personally for me, I think this movie is pretty fun. This movie is pretty fun, and I think I enjoyed it a lot more than I thought I would. The Predator scenes are pretty awesome. They do the same thing from the first movie where they kind of obscure the Predator a lot, just so when he finally pops up on screen, it's like this giant crazy reveal. And just overall, the general action of this movie is really entertaining. Near the end, there's actually a really awesome chase sequence with Danny Glover chasing after the Predator, like as if this is some sort of like police show and Danny Glover is going after aliens. But that whole chase sequence is fucking great. It's a lot of fun. You know, there's a point where Predator gets hurt, so he goes into some old lady's bathroom to try to heal up. With like weird alien medicines, you know, like this movie, it actually tries to expand on the Predator lore, and it does that in a way that's actually kind of interesting and weird. Overall, the directing of this movie is actually pretty great too. It really feels like a big blockbuster movie, and even though the writing and the characters are a little bit weird and kind of cartoonish, I actually think it's a big part of why I like this movie, because I like the main cast of characters. I like the little strike team that Danny Glover has. All of the characters are pretty interesting in their own way. You know, Danny Glover, he's like the badass cop trying to do what's right for the community. He shoots first, asks questions later. And then you have, what's his name? The guy from Twister, Bill Paxton or some shit like that. He's in this movie and he plays a really weird, over-the-top Southern police guy.
Hey, do you mind? It's my sister.
Say what? Oh, you're not my sister, are you?
Who got transferred from a different place to go over to Los Angeles. And there's a whole thing where, like, you know, they don't respect him at first, but as the story goes on, you know, they start liking him. And there's like small little character details like that are really, really cool, especially when the movie starts to transform into your basic Predator kills off main characters movie. Like this movie, it's not lazy. It actually cares about the story that it's telling. It's actually trying to be a good Predator movie. And I think it succeeds. I think this movie is really fun, really entertaining. It's awesome. Not only is it an awesome Predator movie, but it's also a somewhat interesting little cop movie, little police movie going on. A classic tale of the police versus the feds. You know, the feds, they don't give a shit about the public. They only get involved when they see some way to profit out of it. Then you got the cops who are like, oh man, fuck these feds. We're trying to do the right thing over here. We're cops. We protect the public, bitch. Then the Predator is over there and he's like, I didn't meet that 12-year-old girl, I promise.
How many times did you ask for a picture from a kid?
A lot.
This movie is cool. It's a cool little movie. I liked it. I thought it was fun. I would give it a 7 out of 10.
It's all right. I'm a cop.
I don't think he gives a shit.
The next movie that I watched in June is Hospital Massacre, also known as X-Ray for some reason. And this movie is pretty bad. I kind of hate this movie. This movie sucks. Honestly, it kind of pissed me off.
No, don't. It's too late. Come on, dude, don't. It's already in motion. Well, put it out of motion! You pissed me off.
This movie is about a woman named Susan who goes to the hospital to check on her x-rays. But when she gets there, things are a little bit off. And a murderous killer doctor goes around killing people, including Susan's doctor, and then swaps Susan's x-rays with bad x-rays. X-rays that look like Susan is sick or something. So throughout the movie, Susan is sent to doctor as they try to find out what's wrong with her, all while a killer doctor is going around killing people. This movie sucks. This is a hospital slasher movie, which sounds awesome on paper, but the execution of that concept is ridiculously dumb, ridiculously stupid, ridiculously moronic, ridiculously lame, ridiculously boring. I'm Rob Deerdeck, and this is ridiculousness. Oh yeah, and I forgot to mention this movie takes place on Valentine's Day.
Happy Valentine's Day.
Why is this movie set on Valentine's Day? Well, the only reason is so that the murderous killer doctor can say, I want your heart, Susan.
What do you want?
What I've always wanted. Your heart.
So fucking dumb. So fucking stupid. Obviously, as a hospital slasher film, this movie tries to play up the fears and anxieties you would have while you're at the hospital, which sounds like a really good idea. You know, whenever you're at the hospital, it's a little bit creepy. You don't know what's wrong with you, and you're waiting for doctors to tell you what's wrong with you, but most of the time, the doctors tiptoe around what's wrong with you.
Has Dr. Jacobs seen these?
I don't know. Why, is there anything wrong?
Excuse me a second.
So this movie tries to play that up in a way that's kind of suspenseful and weird, but I think it's a little bit too over the top, to the point where it's kind of annoying and kind of goofy. There are so many random scenes in this movie where Susan is like walking around the hospital or something, and then out of nowhere a random patient or doctor comes up to her and starts staring at her for no reason. They just stare at her because it's creepy and weird. So as a hospital horror movie, I think it fails. But how about as a slasher movie? As a slasher film, this movie also fails. In the beginning of the movie, there's a flashback to 1961. And in this flashback, it shows that Susan had a brother once, but he was killed by a psycho little kid stalker because Susan made fun of his Valentine.
From Harold? Oh my God.
So now I guess he wants to terrorize Susan on Valentine's Day, 19 years later, in a hospital, posing as a doctor.
Somebody help me!
The kills in this movie are not the best. The first few kills are actually not bad, but then as the movie goes on, the kills get worse and worse. There's a scene where Susan is watching a doctor in a file room.
What?
But then in that same scene, the doctor that Susan is watching starts looking around the file room with a flashlight. And then of course, out of nowhere, the psycho killer doctor is right behind him. But this is the thing. Susan is in the same room, and she's watching this doctor. Why didn't she scream or something? What's happening? And then later, there's another kill where the psycho doctor runs in a hallway with a sheet. And then he covers some nurse with the sheet and then injects her with some sort of poison or something. And I think the movie was trying to be clever because as she's walking away, she kind of looks like a ghost. God, this movie is terrible. Also, for no reason, Susan has an ex-husband and a daughter, but also has a boyfriend. It's like the writers wanted to make this movie as confusing and convoluted as possible. But her boyfriend does end up going into the hospital to try to help Susan out. But then as he's waiting in the hospital, there's like an intercom that tells him to pick up some phone.
I'm the only gentleman in the hallway. Are you calling me? Well, of course I'm still here. I was told I could wait, so I waited. Yes. What, room 911?
This movie predicted 9/11. That's the only other notable thing I can think of when talking about this movie. And you know, it's kind of a shame because, like I said, I think a hospital slasher film would be genius, especially if it was made during the peak of the slasher era, which of course is the 80s. But no, this movie sucks. It's awful. I will say, though, that the directing isn't that bad. There's some shots that look pretty good, and it's just kind of a shame that the writing and the directing of the actors and the actions were just all so lazy and stupid. I would give it a 3 or a 4 out of 10.
Give me a cigarette.
The next movie that I watched in June is Friendship. It's a new movie starring Tim Robinson.
Yeah, well, what color would I get? I guess it probably doesn't matter what color. Well, actually, it might matter. Oh, shit! Oh, shit! Help! Help!
This movie is about Tim Robinson, who really wants to be Paul Rudd's friend. And that's pretty much it. I mean, there is more to it. There's a whole family thing going on. Actually, this movie is more family stuff rather than friendship stuff. Pretty much, Tim Robinson's family is kind of depressing. His wife is recovering from cancer, which I guess has caused a lot of strain in their relationship.
Tammy deserves a parade. And I'm orgasming fine.
And overall, Tim Robinson, he's like disconnected from his family, doesn't have any friends, he's a very lonely person. And one day he runs into Paul Rudd and sees this dude, this weatherman guy who has a band and cool friends. And the whole movie is basically him longing for this friendship with this cool guy that he thinks is the shit. But of course, as the movie goes on, you know, Paul Rudd, you know, he ain't the shit. And this movie was, it was okay. I don't know if I've talked about a straight-up comedy on this series yet, you know, other than Jay and Silent Bob reboot. But comedy, it's a weird genre for me. It doesn't always work for me. I can only think of 2 straight-up comedies on the top of my head that are really funny. And those are Black Dynamite and Hi Mom. Those movies are funny. I laugh when I watch those movies. Did I laugh while watching Friendship? I chuckled a few times, but honestly, I think this movie is much more funny after the fact. Like, if you were to describe this movie to someone, you'd probably be laughing while you're describing it. Now, obviously, this movie is all held up by Tim Robinson. And Tim Robinson is one of those funny guys who have been making the rounds on the internet. Seems like Twitter loves him. He made a show on Netflix called I Think You Should Leave, which I did not watch. But recently, he came out with a new HBO show called The Chair Company, and that show is actually really great. I've been watching it, and it's really funny.
Fucking shit!
Ron?
And it seems like to me, Tim Robinson's shtick is like playing up the insecurities and like the, I guess, the intrusive thoughts that your average person would have. And playing it up in a very over-the-top way that comes off as kind of surreal.
Teenage girls these days, they look like they're 25 years old. I guess it's the same with the guys, too.
But with Friendship, I feel like this movie is trying to do, like, more than that. I think Friendship, it's trying to tell, you know, the classic tale of the dangers of trying to find yourself into other people, because your life sucks, and you want other people to, you know, show you and tell you what you are. You know, you find friends, you steal the music that they listen to, you steal the things that they talk about, and hopefully, just hopefully, you'll become just as cool as you view your friends. And I kind of like how this movie recontextualizes that idea into this really pathetic story about this guy who ruins his life and his family for just a stupid fucking friendship. But I think the big problem with this movie is the tone of it. There are times when this movie feels like, you know, like a 2010s hipster comedy. But then there's other times in this movie that feel like a 2020s dark drama. And halfway through this movie stops focusing on the friendship stuff with Paul Rudd and starts focusing way more on Tim Robinson's family and the drama that is all going on there. The uncomfortable underlining issues.
There's a new Marvel out that's supposed to be nuts. We should go see that.
My ex-boyfriend, Devin, he invited me out for a drink tonight. So much.
And when I think about this movie, I think to myself, you know, what was the problem? Why was this movie not as good or funny as it could have been? And I think the problem is Paul Rudd. Tim Robinson's character exists in this realm of being very over the top while also being really uncomfortably real. While Paul Rudd feels like he's playing like a very tongue-in-cheek character that doesn't really seem realistic at all. I feel like this movie would be much funnier if Paul Rudd's character was played by a more serious actor, especially when Tim Robinson's wife in the movie, played by Kate Mara, I think. I didn't look that up. If I was right about who that actress is, then I watched too many movies. But her performance in this movie is so good. Like, it's very serious. She's really given this movie her all. But then you go to Paul Rudd, and it feels like this is just another Sunday for him. I don't think Tim Robinson and Paul Rudd mix comedically. There's a lot of funny gags, though. I like how in the beginning Tim Robinson fills up his cup of coffee like all the way to the brim, and then it cuts to him trying to hold the coffee cup without spilling it, trying to make it to his meeting. I think that was kind of funny, just like in a really stupid and subtle way. And of course, the funniest scene in this movie is when he goes to try to do ayahuasca at some phone store, but the kid doesn't have ayahuasca, but instead has like this toad that gives you like a hallucinogenic trip. So Tim Robinson licks the toad, and then he has this really funny trip. I'm not going to spoil what it is. Let's just say it can be described by that one Subway meme that's kind of funny. Overall, the directing was pretty good. It was kind of weird, kind of. The directing, get this, it kind of felt like an A24 film, almost as if this movie is an A24 film. And I did like the soundtrack, but it did feel pretty derivative of, like, they do play some John Moss at one point, and that was pretty cool. I love me some John Moss. But overall, you know, I don't really care about this movie. I really don't. But I recommend The Chair Company way more. That show is much better than this.
Popcorn.
She wants some popcorn?
Popcorn.
She already has some.
I give Friendship a 3 out of 5.
This is why guys shouldn't have friends.
Now it's time to talk about the 28 Days Later trilogy. Yes, I watched all of the 28 Days Later movies, because the new one is coming out. Or it already came out. I saw it. I watched all of these movies. So let's go ahead and start with 28 Days Later. And 28 Days Later, I would say, is pretty fantastic. I would actually go ahead and say that this is probably one of the best zombie movies ever made. This movie takes place in the United Kingdom. This whole series, it's British.
British?
And pretty much there's some type of sickness going around. A virus called the Rage virus.
The chimps are infected. They're highly contagious. They've been given an inhibitor.
Infected with what?
Rage.
A virus called the Rage virus. And pretty much this Rage virus turns you into a flesh-eating, crazy zombie that runs. This is the first zombie movie that runs.
But we were the first people to make zombies run, you know, and changed everything.
What the fuck is talking about?
And something really unique about this zombie virus compared to other zombie viruses is that this one actually starts pretty quickly. After you get infected, you only have a few seconds until you turn into a crazy killing machine. But the movie's main character is Jim, who wakes up in a hospital 28 days later after the outbreak, only to find out that the UK is in shambles and everything is shit. And as the movie goes on, he meets a ton of different people, makes a lot of different friends, while also learning how to survive in this terrible environment, while also learning how to become his own man. It's a great premise. It's very well done. And if it sounds familiar, it's because The Walking Dead completely ripped it off.
Me? You mean me?
Don't get me wrong. I love The Walking Dead. I think Season 1, Episode 1 to Season 7, Episode 1 is one of the greatest shows ever made. Genuinely, some of the best zombie shit you'll ever find is in that period of The Walking Dead. It's just a shame that the show kept going.
Shut up!
Anyway, 28 Days Later. I really love this movie, like, quite a lot. I love the sincerity of this movie, and I really love the characters of this movie. I think every character has a very specific purpose, and I think they're all very interesting and really likable in certain ways. Of course, you have Frank and his daughter, who kind of represent love in this movie. Like, real love, you know, not lustful love, but love. And then you have Selena, who is probably one of my favorite woman characters in a movie ever. She's really great in this movie, and I love how she has her own little arc going on. Because in the beginning of the movie, all she's focused on is survival.
Plans are pointless. Staying alive's as good as it gets.
Like, the fact that she brings Jim along with her is really more of like a survival move than anything else. And she says in the beginning of the movie that survival is the only thing that matters. As long as you're alive, you should be grateful. Which is true, but as the movie goes on and she sees the relationship between Frank and his daughter, she kind of comes to understand the importance of, like, you know, love and bonding amongst other people. And I really like that. I like that little arc. I think that's nice. But of course, the heart and soul of this movie is with Cillian Murphy, Thomas Shelby. Of course, he has the most interesting journey in the whole entire movie, not just because he wakes up weeks after the outbreak, but also because his whole arc in this movie surrounds, you know, the struggles of growing up into your own man. Of course, right after he gets out of the hospital, he wants to go see his parents. And when he gets to his parents' house, he finds out that his parents committed suicide, leaving a note for him saying not to wake up, which is just so beautifully tragic. And from that moment on, it's almost like he doesn't know how to act. He doesn't really have time to process what's going on, so all he really has to focus on is survival. But of course, as the movie goes on, he comes across two different father figures, two complete opposites. Of course, you have Frank, who I think represents love, but you also have Major Henry West, who represents, I guess lust. Lust without love. And throughout the movie, it's almost like Jim is trying to find out what type of man he is. I really like how the first zombie that he interacts with in the movie is a priest, which of course you would call father. And then as the movie goes on, he almost acts like a spoiled brat almost like an angsty teen or a young adult or something.
We've got enough food, Jim.
We don't have any cheeseburgers.
And it all culminates to the scene where he kills his first zombie, which happens to be a young child. A little bit on the nose, but I think it works very well. He's killing his old self. He's killing his child self because he's living in an environment that doesn't prioritize children anymore. And that's what's really cool about this movie. It's a zombie apocalypse movie about becoming your own man, about learning to rise above the ashes, about being reborn into a new person. I really love how much this movie reminds me of Dawn of the Dead. I really love George A. Romero's Dawn of the Dead. Both movies start with a scene either in a church or featuring a priest, and it kind of sets up the journey in a really great way. Because of course in a zombie apocalypse, society has collapsed. And for anyone who's obsessed with the pleasures of society, it will feel like they're in a living hell. There are certain things that society lets you do that you just can't do in a zombie apocalypse. Specifically, enjoy the pleasures of sinning. The 7 deadly sins. Fucking, eating, taking everything you want, lounging around. You can't do that shit in the zombie apocalypse. You're gonna fucking die. Which in itself actually poses a pretty interesting question. And that question, of course, being, you know, if society lets you sin so much, then does that mean society is actually a living hell? And that a world more simple, that is more focused on survival, is actually the way we're supposed to be living? A question that this movie actually does talk about a little bit.
Man has only been around for a few blinks of an eye. So if the infection wipes us all out, that is a return to normality.
And overall, this movie is really great. It has everything you'd want out of a zombie apocalypse movie. I also really love the directing in this movie too. It's a very unique style that is very specific to the 2000s. There's a lot of really great shots in this movie that almost look like paintings, which is kind of awesome. And of course, the soundtrack is iconic. You know, that main theme for this movie, and I guess for the whole trilogy, is pretty awesome. It's badass. So yeah, overall, I would give 28 Days Later a 10 out of 10. It's a perfect zombie movie. It's everything you want.
Do you know what I was thinking?
You were thinking that you'll never hear another piece of original music ever again. You'll never read a book that hasn't already been written. Or see a film that hasn't already been shot.
I'm sorry. Don't leave me.
So after 28 days later, 5 years later, they came out with 28 weeks later.
What?
And honestly, I don't like this movie. I think this movie kind of sucks. It's kind of lazy. It's an unneeded sequel. And it's a shame because this movie actually does have some pretty good ideas and some pretty good scenes. For example, the opening scene of this movie is actually pretty great. And it shows two parents, a husband and a wife, hiding out in some house with a bunch of randoms. But out of nowhere, a child knocks on the door, and they let the child in. But of course, the rage zombies followed the child all the way to the house, and they start fucking shit up. This leads the wife character upstairs with the child, and the husband character following after them. But when the husband character gets into the room, a bunch of zombies come in and corner the wife. And in this situation, the husband's like, I'm fucking out of here.
God! Help us!
He abandons his wife, and it's a really great opening. An opening that not only gets you back into the world of 28 Days Later, but is also really interesting and kind of complex. Because what would you do if you were in this situation? What would you do if you had a wife and kids, and your wife was in a situation where you don't think you can save her? Would you sacrifice yourself to try to save your wife, even though you know it's probably not going to work out? Or would you try to leave, try to survive, hopefully being able to reconnect with your children? It's great. It's a fantastic opening. But of course, the movie keeps going. And 28 months after the outbreak, I guess the United States military is going over to the United Kingdom to try to secure a city for people to live in. And that's the first mistake with this movie. It's trying to inject American actors into a British franchise. Part of the reason why the first movie is so good is because of how British it is. So seeing them cast these actors like the lamest Avenger and Michael from Lost. Walt! It's just kind of stupid, disappointing, lame. Is there any other adjective? Anyway, the father managed to make it to the secure zone that the US military has set up. And lucky for him, or I guess, unlucky for him, with how the movie goes, his children arrive. And when they get there, he tells his children that, the mother, she's dead. And he tells them a very loose recollection of what happened.
I seen them biting. I tried to go back. She was already gone.
But of course, the children can't help themselves. They break out of the zone and they try to go back to their old house, trying to find photographs of their mother so they can remember her. But when they get there, they find their mother.
What?
And it turns out the mother is actually immune to the virus. She's immune, but she also is a carrier, which means that she can still infect people. But eventually the dad character goes to meet the mom character, and they kiss, which of course makes the dad into a zombie, causing a huge outbreak in the city. Things happen, and the movie is them trying to escape this fucked up place. And like I said, I feel like this movie is pretty lazy. I feel like I can see the priorities list that the producers gave the director and writer. And it's very clear that the first priority on the list is to try to make this into a huge franchise. Not only is there sequel bait at the end of this movie, which is really fucking retarded, zombies in Paris, but also the inclusion of bigger actors is a pretty big tell, and also they reused that main song from the last movie way too many times. It's just so transparent what this movie is trying to do. Trying to make this movie pleasurable enough for them to go on to make 28 months later, which of course didn't happen, because this movie sucks. It sucks, but like I said, it also has good ideas. Like when the outbreak happens, there's a really great scene where the army soldiers are told to kill everyone.
Abandon selective targeting. Shoot everything. Targets are now free. We've lost control.
Which is kind of reminiscent to George A. Romero's The Crazies. But the problem is that the movie doesn't really go into it that much, and the execution isn't very satisfying. It's just like, yeah, the soldiers are killing everyone. Let's just move on. And then you have the main concept of this movie, which leads me to the second priority on the list. The second priority this movie tries to do is try to have a concept that is close thematically to the first movie. The first movie, of course, being about a guy growing up into an adult, growing up to be his own person after the death of his parents. So this movie tries to be kind of the same thing, except this time it kind of frames it all as like this giant divorce. The husband and the wife character had a falling out. And now there's a huge rift between them and the kids, leaving the kids on their own to try to figure out what they want to do with their lives. Which is kind of interesting, and I think it could have worked well, but I don't think it was all that satisfying. Spoiler alert, it turns out that the son character is also immune to the virus. And at the end, he gets bitten by his dad, and the daughter character decides to kill the dad. But this time, instead of doing what her dad did in the beginning of the movie, leaving someone that he loved because he thought that it was over for them, this time she decides to stick with her brother no matter what. So the whole movie, in a way, is kind of like why you should potentially sacrifice yourself for your love. Which could have been done well, but I feel like this movie is a bit too convoluted to the point where it doesn't really pay that off in a satisfying way. And there's just a lot of really lazy writing and dialogue in this movie that I just thought was really pointless and stupid. A lot of the characters are really lame, especially since the initial characters, the husband and the wife, were so interesting. And then when it comes to the other characters in this movie, like Hawkeye, the girl that looks kind of like Natalie Portman but doesn't at the same time, and Augustus Hill from Oz.
Fuck is a four-letter word. Rape is a four-letter word. Wife is a four-letter word. So is love. Fuck is a curse. So is love.
They all feel just so bland and not interesting at all. And overall, I just really didn't care about this movie. I thought it was such a letdown compared to the first movie. And when making a good movie falls at priority number 3 on the list of priorities, you know you fucked up. So I'm gonna give 28 Weeks Later like a 2 or a 2.5 out of 5. And now it's time to talk about 28 Years Later, the newest installment. And this movie was pretty good. I really liked this movie, actually. I thought it was equally fun and also emotional. I knew I was in for something special after the opening scene. The opening scene to this movie is really awesome. It starts with a bunch of kids watching Teletubbies, and then out of nowhere a zombie comes in and kills all the kids. And the one kid that survives from the zombie attack with the Teletubbies makes his way to the church next door to see his dad, who is also a priest. And the kid is like, "Oh, Dad, please help me, I'm scared." And the dad is like, "Don't be scared. It's Judgment Day. This is what God wants."
So scared, Dad. I know my sister will be dead.
Oh, no, son. Not dead. Saved. Keep this with you always. Have faith. Yes! Yes, my children!
And that's the big difference between this movie and the other ones. This one is much more funny and much more self-aware.
Look at that. That's a new one. It's my fiance.
But 28 years after the outbreak, all of the infected are now secluded onto one island, and this island is quarantined from the rest of the world. No one can enter and no one can exit. Anyway, this movie is about a young boy named Spike. I guess 28 years after the outbreak, parents start calling their kids dog names. But this movie, just like the other ones, is all about the main character Spike growing up into his own person, into his own man. This movie really focuses on the loss of childhood and the painful experience you have to go through in order to grow up into an adult. The first half of the movie is about Spike and his father going out to the mainland where the zombies are, so his dad can teach him how to kill the zombies. And honestly, the directing of this movie is really awesome. It's directed by the director who did 28 Days Later, and because of that, it feels much more like a sequel to 28 Days Later than 28 Weeks did. 28 Weeks Later felt like an American movie that tried to overcompensate by having a lot of shaky cam. And the shaky cam does make sense in the first two movies, because these are like normal people who are still attuned to society, having to get into situations with these crazy sporadic zombies. But in this movie, since the main character is a child who was born after the outbreak, the directing is actually much more childish and playful. Sometimes you'll get some awesome zombie trick shots, and other times the movie will feel like a nightmare. There's also a lot of really awesome montage sequences that almost feel like MK Ultra videos, like trying to brainwash you into thinking like one of the people in the movie. But anyway, Spike and his dad go out to the mainland, and then his dad is teaching him how to be a man and shit, trying to teach him lessons, you know, about zombies or something.
Don't look away, Spike.
Dad, please.
Spike! There's a lesson for you here.
And then the second half of the movie is all about Spike trying to get his mother to a doctor in the mainland. And it's because his mother is sick, and she might die soon if she doesn't see a doctor. And it's almost like the whole journey with him and his mother is like him trying to latch on to his childhood. And that feeling of like latching on to your childhood, that feeling of it all slipping away and like the pain of growing up, it's very transparent in this movie. It's really well done, the emotional scenes. It's very emotional. I almost cried. I did cry. Tears were coming out of my eyes. And I think this movie really encapsulates what this whole franchise is all about. It's all about being forced to grow up due to a fucked up environment and the struggle of losing people along the way. People you love, people you want to keep close. And I like how this movie is all about coming to terms with that. And I also really like how this movie kind of tells the audience, you know, instead of being angry about losing all of these things that you used to love so much, all these people you used to love so much, instead of being rageful about those things and trying to suppress your emotions for survival. Instead, you should appreciate those emotions. Appreciate that you loved what once was.
I love her.
Lila, you love Spike.
So much.
Memento amoris. Remember you must love.
Don't hide your emotions. Embrace your emotions. Don't try to quarantine it off from the rest of your mind like the planet does to this island. Accept it and become a better person because of it. And that is a beautiful lesson. It's crazy how the most emotional movie this year is the movie where naked corpses kill people. And just overall, this whole world of 28 days later, 28 weeks later, 28 months later, 28 years later, whatever the fuck you want to call this stupid fucking trilogy. I think the world of it is pretty awesome. You know, being able to see the new variants of zombies in this movie is really interesting. And I find it interesting that this movie treats all of the zombies like animals rather than humans that are infected. Because after watching the first two movies, the way this movie treats the infected is kind of fucked up. They're like these animalistic monsters, but they were once human, you know? They were human once. I think my biggest complaint with this movie is the fact that it has a cliffhanger ending, setting up for other movies. Like, I just wanted to see a zombie movie. I didn't want to come into a movie to start waiting for another movie to come out. But you know, what can you do? Hollywood will find any way to fuck you up the ass. I would give 28 Years Later a 7 or an 8 out of 10. It was pretty good, and I probably would watch it again. Is this video over now? And that is all of the movies I watched in June. And I'm not gonna lie, this video kicked my ass. I really underestimated how difficult this video would be, especially when it comes to the 28 Days Later franchise. That was hard. Like my penis. Too many days, too many weeks, too many years.
Ain't nobody got time for that.
But yeah, I finished this video. I'm the king, but I also did something else. I have now officially completed half of this series. 6 months down, 6 months to go. You know, this series, it's wholesome, it's family friendly, it's comedic. It deserves awards. But if you're still watching up to this point, then...
Good night. Good night.
Good night, sir.